Okay, good evening, everybody. It's 7 o'clock, so we'll make a start. We've got lots to get through this evening. Thank you very much for joining us. It is a PowerPoint-based webinar, lots of content to get through. And thank you so much for joining us. Like I said, we're going to tell you about our land profit method that Bal and I have put together. We've just finished our first round mentees, and they're getting a lot out of the program already and already doing real projects. So let's go and say why we should be doing this, why we should be in property, and why we should be doing this program in particular. Okay, so this is an overview webinar that tells you about land profit method. It is an overview of what comes up in the modules and in the content and all the support that we provide to people. And we do fervently believe in property. I've been in property pretty much all my life. My father was a builder before me and my grandfather before him. Property is an amazing thing to be in. And I'm sure most, if not all of us, very much agree with that. So what we're going to do is tell you why this is the optimum method to make money in property, because people know that property is good, but why this particular method? What on earth are we talking about? What is this land profit method thing? Okay, so I'm going to tell you a little bit about us. That's Bal, my business partner, and I. The truth, and it is the truth. We're going to burst some myths. Why land, why property, and why Britain? Those are all fair questions. Mindset. We're going to talk about mindset. So important. There's so much negativity out there. We're going to look at various methods in property. We're going to look at our method, which we think is the killer method, and why this particular program. Okay, that's me. Kingsley, it's always a bit hard talking about yourself, but I do have, in fact, nearly 35 years of experience now in planning and development. My career, I am an architect first and foremost, but my career has been very, very closely attached to the planning profession. Even at university, part of my dissertation was mainly focused on planning, whereas other guys in the course were talking about other things. I was always very interested in planning and the interface between planning and architecture and development. I've actually helped write planning and design policies for London boroughs and other people and governments as well. For over 10 years, I was the in-house design advisor inside the London Borough of Greenwich. Okay, I was still a private sector consultant. I was only there typically about 2 days a week, but I was the go-to guy actually sitting in there with the planners for over 10 years. Great fun, loved it. I'm also the head of a leading architectural design practice, and we've done over 550 projects already. I think one number 587 is the latest job number we've had to assign to a project. So over 550 projects over the past 19 years since I set up my design scope company, which is the architecture practice. I'm also a leading property speaker and educator. One thing I've not mentioned there, actually, I was at university for 7 years. I was a university lecturer part-time for 7 years. Again, even though I'm an architect, I was inside the planning department. So I wasn't teaching in the architecture department of the university. I was teaching in the planning department. That was great fun. So obviously enjoy educating and imparting knowledge for other people. So I've been a leading property speaker and educator. Some of these names might be familiar, people like Pin. I've been that for probably 7 or 8 years. My Castle Property, which is online podcasts with George Choi, Premier Property, and also people like Kent Property Meet. I've spoken to all these people and for all these people. There's Bal, my business partner. He started off as a client of mine probably about 8 years ago. He's got over 20 years of property experience. He is an experienced property developer. We've done some great things for him. He is a big-time landlord as well with his own portfolio. He also acts as a land agent with his contacts and his knowledge, and he does specialize in things such as below market deals and options. He also is a general businessman and entrepreneur and has actually featured on Dragon's Den. Okay, the truth. enough about us, the truth. Why land and property? So most people do know, people aren't stupid, at least most people. Most people know that property is a good investment. If they don't say it's not, they're either jealous or perhaps they are stupid. Most people do know that property is a good investment. And that is why they tend to buy their own home to live in. Many people also know that property presents an amazing opportunity. Okay, so here's a couple of truths. How can we prove? Am I just telling fibs, or is there any evidence? How can we prove that property is a good investment? Okay, number one, the banks will lend you hundreds of thousands of pounds to buy a property. Okay, we all know that's true. They would not do that for any other thing. So if you went into a bank and say, excuse me, mate, can you lend me £600,000 so that I pop out and buy some shares? I mean, obviously you wouldn't buy purplebricks.com, but okay, so any shares, even reputable shares, and you've asked the bank to give you £600,000 to go out and buy some shares, they'd either A, tell you to get lost, or B, they'd want it secured against property. Okay, so that tells you how safe property is compared to every other thing. Proof number two is that billionaires and multi-millionaires invest their wealth in property. Okay, so think about that at a deep level. So that's people who are already incredibly wealthy invest their money in property. They might have typically 6 houses around the world, maybe a couple of hotels and a few investment apartments as well. But these guys are already rich. Where do they park their money? In property. Okay, so we can agree that property is a great investment. Now here's the rub. For many reasons, property in Britain is even more special and an even better investment. Here's a few key facts, okay? Britain, and especially England, let's be honest, the population of England is, what, 85, 90% of Britain, of the UK? So we were talking about England, let's be honest. A relatively small island compared to many countries. Number two, it's got stable politics and rule of law, including property law. Don't take these things for granted, guys. A lot of English people take this stuff for granted, but it should never be taken for granted. Number three, it has a large and growing population. So the population's already quite large and it's growing. Number four, it's already wealthy in terms of GDP per capita. It's already wealthy and has a growing economy. And number five, it has a strong and negatively minded planning system. And you might say to yourself, hey, hang on a minute, number five sounds a bit strange. How can number five be a positive? And I'll tell you why it's a positive, because it is a pain in the ass. Don't get me wrong, I have to deal with these guys day in, day out with the planners. But what it means is it prevents a glut of property. The planning system is so strong and so strict and so negative. Let's say another example, let's say somewhere like, I don't know, parts of Spain or Florida, after Lehman went down, there's actually a glut of property. That never happens in England. Or let me give you another example. I've done lots of stuff in Guangdong, you know, southern China and Indonesia, places like that. If you've not got a strong planning system, I mean, say you built a lovely big shopping mall. You think, well, hey, we're quids in here, we're gonna make millions of pounds. How about if another guy built a similar big shopping mall next door to yours? That's not going to happen in England, but that kind of thing can happen in other countries. So having a strong and negatively minded planning system, while it sounds a bit crazy and a bit perverse, in some ways that is an advantage and it does underpin property value. Okay, economies. I mean, we'll get onto mindset in a second, but the media is absolutely mental right now. So despite much negative media, and there are, I mean, let's be honest, there are some definite problems in the UK. So definite homegrown and global issues. The UK is set to do very well over the next 20 to 50 years. Okay, so if you look at, actually delve into this kind of thing, which the evening news probably never would do, Most credible forecasts predict the UK economy is going to grow very strongly. And in just a few years' time, that's only what, 27 years away, it will be one of only 2 European economies left in the global top 10. So there it is. Countries such as France and Italy will drop out of that top 10, and they'll be a long way behind. And then shortly after 2050, the UK is also tipped to overtake Germany as well. So strong economy with strong forecast for economic growth beyond even where we are now. Let's look at housing need. The big buzzword right now, mostly being put forward by people like Elon Musk, and even the United Nations recognize this, is property collapse. So population collapse. So there's a feeling, and the projections are, that the population will continue to rise, maybe to 9 billion, 9.5 billion, but then it will go down. So that gives you some reassurance and gives me some comfort for sustainability and eco issues. So if we can become better at looking after our planet and the population starts going down, that's got to be much better for our planet. Let's be honest, guys. Okay, but let's think about housing, because obviously here's the key thing. The need for housing is obviously related to population projections. Now, the population projections, I've said there, are very enlightening, and most people are either not aware of them or they don't even think about the implications of them. Okay, so there's the UK. That's pretty much where we are now in 2020, or were in 2020, and that's where we're going to be in 2050. So these are all credible stats, either from World Bank or United Nations, okay? That's the UK. How about Japan? I think these figures speak for themselves. You can see what's there now, and what's there in 2050. How about Germany? Again, it speaks for itself. See where we are now. You see where we're going to be in 2050. How about Italy? Oh my goodness. See where we were in 2020? And you can see where we're going to be in 2050. And then the population of Italy is forecast to carry on dropping to like 39 million, 37 million. So the amazing thing about Italy, well, amazing in a bad way perhaps, is the population of Italy, even 20 or 30 years ago, was about the same as the UK, exactly the same as the UK. And shortly after 2050, it'll be half of the UK. Think about that, half of the UK, and it started off the same. Okay, so without stating the blindingly obvious, I think we notice a trend there. So British population going up, and all those countries and many other countries as well, of course, going down, 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 and then quite quickly. So a place like Russia is going to drop even quicker. Even places like China, they reckon China may have topped out already and be going down slightly. India will carry on going up for maybe 20, 25 years, but then even India will top out and start coming down gently. But China may already have dropped down below India. So there's a trend there, clear trend. And this is important, okay? Because if you've got more flats or houses than you need, obviously it don't make life very easy for people like you and me. Now, these factors are even more acute in London and the Southeast. And I think most of us are either in London or the Southeast right now. There's even more pull factor, shall we say. And that makes it even better for investing in some ways. I mean, you could argue that rental returns on capital employed are not so high, which is true. You're actually better off buying a little terrace house up north than in Mayfair. But generally, in terms of value and underpinning value and the kind of thing we're talking about tonight, GDV, Southeast and London are better. Okay, so much of the country's population growth is concentrated in and around London. It's already wealthier than the average for the UK and has a strong economy. And also, number 3 is also important. The planning system in the Southeast and around London is extremely strong because you've got the London Green Belt, which is huge. It's a whole ring that goes right out as far as these towns around here. So it's not just a narrow 100 yards wide thing. It's a huge, great thing, the London Green Belt. Very, very strong policies. and lots of other countrysides protected as well, the AONBs and this, that, and the other. And also lots of the town centres in the southeast are very, very pretty, and they're protected by conservation areas. So you've got everything. It's like the perfect combination. The things that apply to England and the UK generally apply even more so in the southeast. Okay, mindset. I mentioned mindset. So I think we've established that property is a good thing, but there's a lot of negativity out there. So we do need to consider mindset. And here's the key thing at the bottom of this. We need to consider it near the beginning, which is why we're looking at it now. And it's because the world is so negative, okay? And because of that, it's important to counter the negativity. That's all we're doing. We're just countering the negativity. So we're not going to whoop ourselves up into a great big frenzy like an American business conference and go whoop, whoop or anything crazy. That's not the idea at all. And the idea is not to be overly optimistic either. All we're doing is simply making sure that we're balanced and objective. And why do we need to do that? Well, the world is so negative. The media is negative beyond belief. It covers bad news. I mean, you just need to watch the evening news. It covers bad news, and it often seems like it likes covering bad news. The newsreaders seem to get excited when there's a bad news story, then skirt over any good news stories, if there are any. That's usually a couple of minutes at the end of the news, isn't it? So it seems like it likes covering bad news. Even good news has to be caveated with bad news. Like, oh, so-and-so has come down, but not as far as they were hoping. The number of times you hear that kind of expression, it's crazy. And it also seems to be getting worse. So what's happening? There is a mood, the idea of perma-crisis. So there's always something to worry about, the permanent crisis that we're all in the middle of. And also the old adage, of course, that no news is good news. So that's, you know, they love giving you bad news. What about your friends and family? Even they can be very negative as well. I mean, the number of times you might hear, oh, what do you want to do that for? Isn't it risky? Now, these are not bad people. These are your own friends and family, and they might even have your best interests at heart, but they don't have the mindset. They don't have the right mindset. They've not got that balanced mindset. They can't see the opportunities. So what they're doing, really, they're overthinking all the negatives. They're trying to rationalize in their own brain why something should not be done. They only see the potential downside. And like I mentioned there, they've not arrived at a correct balanced judgment of the pros and cons. Some of them may even think it's unrealistic what people like you and me do. They might not like landlords. They might not like investors. They might not like people in property who are developing. They might think in their own minds that it's necessary to work hard. Usually as an employee, you have to work hard, earn 60K and take home 40K if you're lucky. And then out of that 40K, you've got to pay VAT on whatever you buy and petrol tax and this, that, and the other. So you're probably getting half or even less of what you're earning at the end of the day. But they think that's the way things are, and they can't see any alternative. They think that's the way it should be. They probably, many of them even think it might be wrong to earn 400K in a year without working hard by their definition of working hard. And you'd be surprised, a lot of people do have this attitude. Okay, what I always say to people, I've been saying this for years and years, for donkey's years. What I say is donkeys work hard, but they don't earn very much. I guess the strapline is don't be a donkey. Okay, so the key in mindset is to be objective. So we've already discussed how and why property is a good investment, especially in England. There is a shortage of housing in England. Don't believe any NIMBY who might tell you otherwise. I reckon we need to build at least 7 million houses and flats without a shadow of a doubt. Most people would probably agree with that. Received wisdom is that we're at least 4 million behind. We're still not even beginning to address that, so we're falling even further behind. then probably another 3 million or so for the additional people who will come to Britain over the next 20 or 30 years. Okay, so 7 million houses and flats we need right now and to plan for the future. So because of that, and related back to the planning system, and some people could say the big volume house builders are running a bit of a cartel, but it's a planning system first and foremost, in my opinion. There's a perpetual shortage, so there's never a glut, especially in the southeast. You can, at a very, very micro level, you may sometimes get a little bit of a glut. Like there's talk of a glut in Vauxhall around the American embassy, because there were so many thousands of flats coming on stream around the same time. There was talk of a very, very small glut temporarily again in Croydon, in the heart of Croydon, simply because there's so many thousands of flats being built in the same place at the same time. But by and large, annualized or spread over a slightly wider area, there's never a glut in the southeast of England. And I was saying about billionaires investing in property, wealthy people put their money into English property, and they're not stupid. So remember, here's a light bulb moment. Mindset is important because of all the negativity that is around. Okay, so not trying to whoop ourselves up into a frenzy. It's simply that negative people, and this is true, it's the negative people who have failed to arrive at a rational, objective appraisal of the opportunities. So you might say to yourself, okay, I accept that property is great, but what's the best way forward, you know? What is the best thing to do? What's the best method? Okay, here's a few methods in property. You know, I'm actually doing some of these, so they can't all be that bad. Okay, equity appreciation models. That's a very, very fancy way of saying that stuff goes up over time, and property certainly does. You know, year on year, or usually every decade is a good way to measure it. One of my clients says there's never really a correction in the English market. It's only people who've bought in the last 9 months might have a bit of negative equity, but by and large, it's always an upward trajectory, and quite a strong upward trajectory. So under the equity appreciation models, you might buy your own house, it appreciates in value, goes up over time. You could sell it and downsize, or you could do an equity drawdown in your later years. And obviously, if you have a buy-to-let portfolio, that will also appreciate over time and go up the same sort of way. There's also cash flow models. I mean, some of these things are not exclusive. Some properties can do both, of course, at the same time. So cash flow models, things like buy-to-lets, HMOs, service accommodation, rent-to-rent, things like that, they can be quite good for making a margin. So they're quite good as cash flow models. There's also what you might want to call old-fashioned development. And this is not to criticize development, because we do love development. And what I would say, irrespective of what we might tell you later on in this webinar, you can choose, if you're doing our model, you can choose which ones to build out and which ones to flip. Okay, so depending on the market conditions and the ease of construction, etc., that's how you choose which ones are good to flip and which ones are good to build out. Okay, so when many people hear the word developer, they think of old-fashioned development. So you buy some land with planning and you build it out, but that's very expensive and it is quite risky. Okay, here's an alternative. You buy land without planning. You get the planning and you build it out. That's good, but it's still expensive and your money is tied up. It takes even more time because you've got to get the planning yourself before you can start building it, and it is still risky. Okay, they're good and they can all work and they can all make you wealthy. There are hundreds and hundreds of thousands of pounds of wealth. I mean, do you remember that story? I was reading the stat recently. It was something like, if you were born in the last ice age, like whatever that was, 20,000 years ago, and you saved £1,000, I think it was a week. So you saved £1,000 a week, which is pretty hard for any of us. Today, you would still be poorer than Elon Musk. which is incredible. So you can't really save yourself to wealth. You have to invest yourself to wealth. So these things can make you wealthy, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of pounds, or even 1 or 2 millions or more wealth, net wealth. However, they typically take a long time. So the things we've been talking about can often take 5, 10, or 15 years to build significant wealth. So they can be regarded as the old methods. Okay, so what am I talking about? It's got to be a little bit different to those. Otherwise, I wouldn't be a little bit critical of the one that's already gone. The Land Profit Method program can allow you to create significant wealth in 12 months. Depending on the scale of the project, of course, some things can take 18 months or 24 months if you're launching into a bigger project with a longer time frame and more planning and more numbers, okay? You can create significant wealth in 12 months. That's certainly possible, and we've helped people do it. Okay, so it's much better than all those other methods we just discussed. And the funny thing is, here's the rub, guys. Here's a really funny thing. Many people are already doing this to some extent, or they already know it's the best method. Okay, so even they, people like the other people I've spoken for, like I said, like Pin and My Castle and Premier and Kent Property Meet, all those people are doing all the other stuff, but they know, they acknowledge this is the best method, and they acknowledge it achieves quicker and better results. So it's development with an asterisk. Like I say, being a developer, you don't need to get your shoes dirty. You don't have to build it, even if you don't want to. It's development with a lowercase d, shall we say, including flips, okay? And this is the new method. And the secret to this new method is simple. And all the other people, like I say, mention and acknowledge this is the best method. So Bal and I got our heads together and thought, well, why on earth aren't people just focusing on the best method if they agree it's the best and easiest and lowest risk? And here's a secret, okay? And that's what we're very, very good at, is find land and buildings to which you can add value through planning. So when I'm talking about land, we don't just mean an empty piece of land, an empty site. We are also talking about buildings, whether it's a big empty Debenhams or a big empty warehouse or even a pub. You've probably seen, I don't know if any of you follow me on social media, we're doing one at the moment where there's a pub. It was quite a big pub. It wasn't failing as such, but it wasn't making heaps of money. So what we've done actually on that one, we've kept we've got a real prime corner on the corner of 2 streets, which is straight opposite a railway station. So we've kept 1/3, just 1/3 of the downstairs is still a pub, okay? Like a micro pub. And they estimate that can still bring as much money as the other 2/3 did when the entire thing was a pub. The other 2/3 of the downstairs has gone residential. The upstairs has all gone residential, and we're adding an extra mansard story on top, which is all residential. So while that's still a pub downstairs in the corner, the pub's actually only 1/9. So 1/9 of that building is a pub. The rest is resi. So buildings can be land as well. Okay, the other secret of the new method is that it ain't really a secret at all. So if people acknowledge it's the best method, which they do, then why not just focus on that method? So it's not a secret. It's just that people are failing to focus and they're diluting their time. So your time and energy is precious. So you might as well use it wisely. Okay, so if you follow this new method that Bal and I are doing with our program and support, it provides the following for people, and it already is doing this and has done this for our mentees. It provides you with clarity, focus, expert advice, and accelerated results. And it can do that in a minimal risk way and a minimal cost way. There's no such thing as risk-free. There's always a chance that something might not come off, and you may have invested, say, $4,000 looking into something. So nothing's risk-free, but it's minimal risk and minimal expense with accelerated results. The problem is that most people don't know how to do it. Now, obviously, I know you guys, I know all of you, well, most of you personally, people at different stages of their journey. So what we've done, our program really is focused on people who are new-ish. Everybody, all of our mentees know something about property, and they actually all bring something to the table in the discussions that we have, which is great, you know, because everybody brings different insights to the table. But it's people who are new-ish to the property market, or and people who want to ramp it up a little bit. So there's lots of people who are landlords who are thinking, hey, I'm missing a bit of a trick here. I want to develop as well, either in the muddy boots sense or in the spreadsheet sense. So it's for people who are either fresh to development or are already in it and want to ramp it up. But very often people don't know how to do it. So the other thing that Bal and I got our heads together and said, you have to consider the purpose and intent behind a program. So why have we included the things we cover? When I'm talking to my own staff at the Designscape Architects, one of the key questions I ask, they might say, here's my pretty drawing, you know? So the key question is, what is the purpose of this drawing? Is the purpose to try and win over the planners or win over the public? Or is the purpose that the builder can build something correctly? So you always need to delve down deeper into things and think about the purpose behind everything. So the purpose behind the program, the Land Profit Method, is to give you the knowledge and skills required to develop. And this includes knowing the theory. So there's lots of theory about planning and all the parameters and what to look for, why something can go where and it won't be able to go anywhere else. So you know the theory, you need to be able to apply that theory. So we're not talking in abstract, we're not playing SimCity or some kind of crazy video game. We're talking about real sites in the real world. Okay, so there's always something unique about each site, which is why I love my job so much. Every week is different, every day is different, every site is different. Even if there's some analogies to some of the past projects, everything is different. So you need to apply it to real world conditions. And also how to exit. How do you exit these deals? Okay, so the answer to the problems below is what people need. And these are problems, these are sticking points and roadblocks that are stopping people going forward very often. Do you know what to look for? Do you know how much development can fit on a site? Do you know what is and isn't likely to get planning permission? So for example, I was at Greenwich for 10 years. On the other side of the fence, it's the old gamekeeper poacher situation, isn't it? And then on the private sector side, we've done these 587 projects. So I've got a reasonable understanding of what is and isn't likely to get planning permission. Do you know the planning policies? Do you know all about permitted development? So there's so much to permitted development. Most people know they can build a conservatory or a little extension beyond their house without needing planning. But there's so much more to PD than that, believe me. It's absolutely eye-opening. Also, do you know how to secure sites without paying for them? Absolutely critical to know this kind of thing. So this is where we can help. So if you don't know the answers to some of those questions, then people do need help and guidance, which is why people have been joining the course. You need that knowledge. You need someone with that experience. You need reassurance as a sounding board to bounce ideas off. And you also need ongoing assistance. So what's tending to happen, our mentees might come in with a long list to say, hey, I'm looking at these 30 sites, you know. As they get upskilled, which they do week after week, they might be pretty good themselves at narrowing down that long list of 30 sites down to about 12 sites. And then they'll bring that to us, and we, either in the Q&A sessions or in a private one-to-one, will help them whittle it down to a short list of maybe 5 or 6, and maybe prioritize that short list, and then help them in speaking to the vendors and the agents. Okay, so you need the ongoing assistance as well. So the knowledge and the experience equals credibility. So you do need people who know what they're talking about and are actually doing it. Okay, so what does the program cover? You need to understand what it is that you're actually looking for. Because if you know what can go on a particular kind of site, you can flip that relationship right on its head, and it helps you to know what to look for, what kind of sites to look for in the first place. We also teach you about the available tools, things like Nimbus and other softwares that are available out there, some of which will blow your mind. And even if you don't use Nimbus, even things like Rightmove have got so many features on them. It's just incredible. And it's typical of all software, I guess. Most people only use, say, 5 or 10% of the capacity of the software they have. And that's certainly true of things like Rightmove. We teach you how to find suitable land and suitable sites, how to secure that land, and how to secure planning. Also, how to structure deals, how to raise finance, and these exit strategies, which I mentioned. We also have some very exciting bonus modules delivered by specialists, things like people in tax advice, setting up trusts, funders, teach you how to find funding, people who are on your same mindset, they know what you need and when. So they're going to be delivering some of these bonus modules. What else do we provide? So full support. You can have calls with us. You've got our contact details, so you can get in touch if there's anything you want to speak about. We also have a Facebook community where you can ask questions of us, and we post each time. And I also share my other posts to the group. Access to our power team, because obviously Bal and I, the black book, if you like, we know hundreds of tradesmen, lawyers, accountants, funders, planners, architects, of which I'm one. So we know all these people, and also access to our database of buyers and end users. Okay, so Bal and I are already framing stuff, knowing who the end user might be. A lot of big builders and developers, and say people like local authorities, their housing waiting list, and people like care home providers, they have a need. So they already know what they're looking for. So if you can help to fulfill their need, it's absolutely fantastic. Here's a little example that I went back to last Thursday. I visited 5 sites on Thursday in Bexley, and they were all within about 1 kilometre or so of each other, our projects. So this is a very, very simple example, which is just one little house, okay? So this is not Mayfair. You can see it's not Mayfair. So it's not the poshest area, not got the highest GDV. It is in London, which a lot of overseas investors like as well. In the past, overseas investors would say specific postcodes in London where they were prepared to invest. These days, they often just say anywhere inside the M25. Okay, so at least it's in London. So London Borough of Bexley. Very, very small site. Look at that, tiny. All it is a bit of garden of this semi-detached house here. That's all it was. That's all it ever has been. So really small site. We got planning for this, just a very simple house. That's how it sits on its site. And we've done, obviously, over 550 of these. We've done loads and loads even of houses in gardens. It's one thing that we actually become specialized in to some extent. And I'll pick up on that later. So nice little house, nice little garden. One thing about London boroughs, they are more open-minded about having a slightly smaller garden or a stranger shaped garden. Most planners in most parts of England would prefer a nice big rectangular garden like this, at least 10 meters long. So 10 meters long and rectangular. But London boroughs are much more laid back about that. So very, very simple example. Certainly not big or scary. I'm sure we'll all agree on that. And one thing that we managed to do, it was like double bubble, if you like. So one of our clients flipped it to another one of our clients. So the guy who got the planning initially, he was able to sell that land with planning, the planning that we got for him. We then did the construction drawings for the new guy, and he's going to make, touch wood, lots of money as well. One thing I would say, do be a little bit wary, guys. Build costs are horrendous right now. They are very, very high. So in the past, people always, when I started in the 80s, people used to say a third, a third, a third. You say, what do you mean by that? You mean the land is about 33% of GDV. The construction cost is about 33% of GDV. and gross profit will be about 33% of GDV to make sure you can make at least 20-25% net on the deal. Okay, that is not the case now. Build costs are so high that build costs can often be about 40% of GDV. So what that means is it's important you never overpay for things in the first place. Okay, so anybody who overpays for a piece of land or for a building is pretty much screwed from day one. So do be a bit careful about build cost. Okay, but this was done with an option. You got outlay, obviously planning costs, my costs, that kind of thing. So total outlay, and these are the numbers pretty much. You got clear uplift on the land. The second guy pay the vendor's fee, then clear profit on the deal of about the same. In fact, it's going to be more than that because the values have gone up even beyond that, which is good. But you can't always depend on a rising market because things are pretty quiet out there with the agents. So you need to be quite careful on you can't build in factoring for a rising market right now. But there's enough money in the pie to keep everybody happy. That's the incredible thing. So obviously, this is not the only one I share, and I'll share some more with you by email tomorrow morning if you wish. Lots of real world examples, because that puts the meat on the bones. That shows the credibility that this is not just an academic exercise. It's not just theoretical. These are real sites with real buildings. And I mentioned there, after all, we've got plenty to draw from, because obviously I've done over 550 deals, and we do share the backstory on some of those schemes as well. And we certainly share the projects with you. But like I say, the backstory is often as interesting as the actual scheme and how you arrived at the scheme and who made what and when. Okay, so let's look at some specifics. Okay, so we've given the overview. This land profit method, planning. Okay, planning is critical. It's all based on adding value through planning. So obviously planning is going to be front and center. The planning system, types of planning, how it works or doesn't work, and tricks and hacks. PD, there are many, many different types of PD. Some of them are really long documents, some are a bit shorter. The main PD document is 160 pages and it's got no pictures to color in. So I always say it's good for insomnia, So, but there's so much to PD. And I'm being a bit trite in saying it's boring and legalese, but of course the PD documents are worth billions and billions of pounds. So in terms of what they can unlock for people, what they are, what they allow, and obviously lots of examples of schemes we've actually done using PDs. Design for development. Okay, so what do we mean by this? This basically is talking about things like space standards and how far you need to be from other people's windows, from the neighbors, and not overlooking their garden, and things like rights of light and daylight and sunlight assessments, all that kind of stuff. So when we say design, and this is true of the planning system as well, when we say design, we don't mean the aesthetics, whether something looks contemporary or old-fashioned. In some ways, that comes last, okay? So the design for development is much more fundamental than that. It is the design parameters and how you actually frame a scheme, if you like, before you put the window dressing on it. Real-world sites, and that's why it's good to look at lots of examples. I mentioned there, every site is different. So how do you apply the theory to real sites? Lots of people do property education courses. They might learn a lot in a long weekend and think, whoop, whoop, I'm ready to take over the world now. Turf out, they go to a new site on a Tuesday morning and think, oh my God, how the hell do I try and apply what I learned over the weekend to this site? Or they won't do anything for 2 or 3 weeks and think, I can hardly remember half of what I learned in that weekend. So I've got even less chance of applying it to a real site. Practical tools. We mentioned things like the Nimbus, software tools that are available, information at your fingertips. That's the key thing, guys, information at your fingertips, saving you time. So a lot of these softwares that you can get these days, you could do the legwork and find out a lot of that knowledge yourself. It'll take you ages. It might take you a week or two of your own precious time. So if that knowledge is all brought together in one place, just click 2 seconds here, 3 seconds there. That's a really, really powerful thing at your fingertips. How to secure the sites? Again, I mentioned it, minimal risk and the minimal outlay. The team, the importance of having a good team around you. The team is essential, especially if you do hit site, but even getting the planning beforehand, things like, let's say, daylight and sunlight assessments, decontamination, all this sort of stuff. There's lots of things that can trip you up in planning before you even get to anywhere near the planning approval. And if you need to go to appeal, how do you persuade the appeal inspector to give you planning permission if the council thought it shouldn't? Little tricks like this, really important. But having a team around you, I'll tell you a couple of really good reasons you need a really good, strong, solid team. One reason, you think about the knowledge that's on a site. So say you got like 4 or 5 consultants and they've each got 25 years of experience in their respective fields. That's over 100 years of experience. So what will happen if something goes wrong, and things usually always do go wrong on building sites, there's always something a little bit left field. And if you're doing something, say, like a conversion or refurb, the minute you start opening up that building, it'll be different to what people expected. Okay, so there's always something a bit left field, something goes a bit awry or a bit off track. Now, if you didn't know what you were doing, you could think, oh my God, the sky's falling in. This is a nightmare. But if you surround yourself by a good team, the chances are somebody in that team, or even a couple of the people, will say, oh, don't worry, mate, we had something exactly the same as this on a site 15 months ago. You just do this, this, and this. So it's that reassurance and that knowledge which counts for everything. And because of that strength of team, a lot of funders, okay, so if you're a relatively novice developer, a lot of funders will only fund you if you surround yourself by a good team. And they will look into the credibility. They'll look at your websites of your structural engineer and your architect and this, that, and the other to make sure they are who they say they are, and they've been around for decades and that kind of thing. So having a good team around you is essential. Also, exit strategies. Okay, so ways of exiting, preferred ways of exiting, and the bonus of having multiple exit strategies. So if you've got a site and you're comfortable exiting in 2 or 3 different ways, hold and rent, sell with planning, or sell after you've built it, having different exit strategies. You may very well have a preferred one, but the fact you've got a number of exit strategies that you're comfortable with puts you in a much stronger position. Okay, here's our first graduate mentee. Whoop, whoop. Azad Peshderi, and there he is with his certificate. Now, Azad's already moving forward on a number of projects, like we mentioned there. We're helping him with those. And the great thing about Azad, he's actually the guy, he joined one of our mentoring webinar sessions live from Iraq, which is incredible. So it's not just a little thing. The whole world is shrinking, guys. Okay, so you can join these sessions from anywhere in the world these days. And it's amazing. That's probably one good thing in a way that's come from COVID, is the acceptance of things like Zoom and Teams and webinars, etc. But yeah, Azad joined us live from Iraq. So what we're going to do now is Azad would like to say a few words. So let's get Azad up. And right, where are you? Just need to allow you to speak, Azad. And thank you very much for doing this. We do appreciate it. There we go. Sorry, Azad, it took me a while. Okay, so you can unmute yourself now, Azad.
Yes.
Right, if you just be kind, I'll shut up because people have had enough of me. If you'd be kind enough to maybe spend a couple of minutes just explaining what your experience has been of the program and your relationship with us and how we're taking things forward.
Yes, hi everyone. Basically, I started the property business around 15 years ago, and I was mainly a landlord, buying a property and sit on it and reap the benefit. And then one day I was in my car and I heard on the news that someone bought a mansion in I think Chelsea, and then converted it into 15 flats and made millions and millions. And I thought, wow, okay, I can do that. So I started with my first property, diving into this venture, not knowing anything about it. And I was extremely lucky that the first property I pulled it off. I bought, well, the house that I'm living in it right now, and it had a couple of garages on the side. So I converted the garages to another home. And I thought, wow, that's brilliant. So I can do it. So I went on and I moved to another property, which I purchased. And that is where my luck stopped. So basically, that is a property right now, even Kingsley dealing with it. It's number 12, Kingsley. So that is a property I thought I can do it again. But obviously, I didn't have the right knowledge, the expertise, and not knowing what to look for. I was basically just looking for a property with a bit of land on the side to convert it. And that hit me hard. And that is where I thought I need an expert advice. I need to know what I'm doing, need to know what I'm looking for. And that is where I found Kingsley. And I met Kingsley at the property and we discussed it, and we had a plan. And I remember in the garden of that property, that particular property, I said to Kingsley, can you mentor me to do what I want to do, which is basically property development? And he agreed. And since then, I joined the first course and the second one, and this is the third one. And every time I learn something new. And believe me, guys, right now, I pretty much know what I need to do. In fact, just a few days ago, I put an offer on a property which was accepted, and I sat down and I drew the plan myself and sent them to Kingsley. And guess what? Kingsley agreed to that plan. And as they are, we forwarded them to the planning department. That is how good that course is, or these courses are. It just an eye opener. You know where to go, what policies to follow. And with a bit of luck, you will be in a much better place than a lot of people doing it.
Yeah, thank
The
you very
main
much.
thing is it's the policies, knowing
Yeah.
your policies, and that is where Kingsley is very keen on explaining.
Yeah, it is an absolute minefield, the planning system. I mean, lots of people are saying the planning system is broken right now. I say it's not, because there are some good planners out there still and some good members, council members, but it is nearly broken. So even if you know what you're doing, it's quite hard. And that's one of the first things you said to me, Azad, wasn't it? Being an architect in England, it's not just about designing buildings, it's about the knowledge to negotiate the planning system. So you do need both, and if you don't have that, people could come a cropper. They could lose their shirt off their backs, couldn't they? But thank you very much for that, Azad. People have the pleasure of another 10 or 15 minutes of me now, but I'm sure they much preferred listening to you. Thanks, Azad. Appreciate that. Right, okay, let's go back to share screen. Okay. Yeah, it was great. And Azad is obviously a top bloke, you know, really good. One thing he didn't mention is actually his wife is an Iraqi architect. So I'm not convinced Azad did all those drawings himself, but maybe his wife helped a little bit as well. So she's the new Zaha Hadid of the architecture world. But there's Azad with us when he graduated with his diploma, which is great. So all our second round mentees are about to get their diplomas, which is fantastic. Okay, and we do actually have, just quickly on that subject, we've got a number of pre-apps in with Azad right now. We've even got a virtual meeting tomorrow, Azad and I, with one of the local authorities, which I'm looking forward to, because obviously I do loads and loads of these things, you know, on both sides of the fence. So I actually quite like that sort of engagement with planners. If you can ever engage with planners, then do so, yeah. And just quickly, because you can pay a little bit of money for a written pre-app, it's worth paying a few £100 more for a meeting, even a virtual meeting, but best of all is a real world meeting on site, if you can, where you can really look them in the eye and discuss things in the real world. situation. Like I mentioned, we're not in a simulation, at least most people don't think so. A lot of scientists do, but you know, you need real life situations, and that's when the context comes out, and you can talk to the planner about real nuts and bolts stuff as it applies on a site. So do engage with planners. A lot, I can tell you from being on the other side of the fence for 10 years, a lot of planners are scared of you. You probably wouldn't believe that. A lot of planners don't want to engage. They're a bit timid and scared to engage because they think they'll get it in the neck. But certainly on our side of the fence, don't ever be scared of planners. And if you get the opportunity to engage with them, then please do. Okay, back to the content. What we do after these education modules, which are once a fortnight, we have a bit of homework, okay? Now, sometimes, don't get too scared, sometimes it can be learning, okay? So the homework might be something like, read the free gift. So we just emailed you a free gift. You can read it and enjoy it at your leisure. And yes, we do give out free gifts. They're not gold watches or anything. They're usually guides, so PDF reports that I've produced or received knowledge from the government or from local authorities about how to do things. But a lot of them are written by me. And it tells you how to carry out projects, what to look out for, and features lots of the schemes. Okay, so we've got over 550 to draw from, and the projects that I've been working on the last 19 years, they range from 1 unit up to 85 units. Okay, so every scale. I mean, to be honest with you, what we tend to do very often is things like 6 to 9 flats on really tight urban sites. I love doing that kind of thing, but we do things that are smaller than that, but in quite a few, say 25 to 30 houses or 25 to 30 flats, a lot of micro flats. So we're pretty much specialized in that as well, the idea of micro apartment developments, and there's lots of knowledge around that as well. And like I said, the biggest we've done is 85 houses, which is on site right now. Now, here's the key thing, guys. We're even going to give you a free gift today, or maybe tomorrow morning, a free gift, which is going to be a report, okay? It's one of these reports that show you how to do things, why you should be doing it, and loads of examples of how you can do it. So I'm sure, I do hope you're all going to enjoy reading those. So that'll be with you. Obviously got your details, of course we gave you the invite for this meeting. So we'll email those through to you all tomorrow. So you get a free gift, free webinar and a free gift. Okay, now another kind of education homework can be awareness. Okay, so rather than just reading something, we might say, and obviously you'll do this automatically anyway. So the homework assignment, say in one of the early weeks, might be just to look out for development opportunities. Okay, a lot of people put their earpods in their ears and just get their head down, looking at their phone. They haven't got a clue which flipping city they're living in, let alone which street they're walking down. Awareness is a big thing. Like I say, we live in the real world. Have a look at the real world. It's a lovely world. Now, the opportunities may be near your home, I've said there, or your place of work, or taking the kids on the school run, or on the bus, or in your car, they might drive past. Now, what happens, a bit like Azad was saying, over the course of the program, the awareness actually heightens, and you start seeing more opportunities. So a development site is not a piece of sandy ground with a chicken wire fence around it. A development site can be anything. It can be part of a building. You can put apartments on top of apartments. You can put apartments on top of shops and on top of office blocks. You can change the office block into apartments. You can do a little infill scheme. You can extend backwards, upwards, sideways, backwards. You can even change the use of a building to a higher value. There are so many opportunities. And I've said there, in fact, you'll see opportunities everywhere. If you walk down a high street with the knowledge that we have and the mentees have, you'll see opportunities everywhere. And that means you can start having conversations with people if you wish. And then you can pursue the most favorable of those conversations. So it does really open your eyes as to the opportunities. We also have an update and Q&A sessions. Okay, so the education modules for our mentees are once a fortnight, and they alternate with dedicated Q&A sessions, which are also once a fortnight. It's obvious how it works. One then the other, one then the other. And these are genuine open floor Q&A sessions, because I've been doing these things for other people, other education people in the field. What we do, these are genuine open floor Q&A sessions. So they're not vetted, and you don't need to send your question in 2 days beforehand or drop it into a chat box. You can actually ask the question. It's to and fro. And I'm a great believer, and that's for the benefit of everybody, you see, because I'm a great believer. If somebody asks a question, then very often the chances are it's on the tip of the tongue of lots of other people in a group. So it's good to share all this stuff and ask real questions and get debates. I mean, sometimes you might disappear down a bit of a rabbit hole, but every question has a backstory and opens up another avenue that it's usually very much worthwhile pursuing. Also, the Q&A sessions actually start off with an update. So in each update and Q&A session, we pass on important things that we have noted which can affect your journey. So obviously we keep our ear to the ground. We're very much in the property community, especially on the socials. I'm connected with lots of people like top KC barristers and that kind of thing, which obviously I've worked with a few KCs on top end appeals in London, both for councils and for the private sector. They're a joy to work with. They're not cheap, usually about £6 a day the first day and £5 a day thereafter. So they're not cheap, but they have got their finger on the pulse. So one of the big things at the moment, to be honest with you, is criticising the government where they deserve to be criticised. Okay, so we've got our ear to the ground. We know about things like mortgages and funders and products that are available. Bal has very much got his finger on the pulse when it comes to products that are entering the market for funding. And we do share all this stuff pretty much in real time. So each week, as things come to the fore that we become aware of, we share all that knowledge with you. Now, Sarah, it's good and bad. So if something's good, it's great to hear about it. But if something's bad for your journey in the property industry, it's also equally important to know about that as well. So good or bad, we'll share with you. We also pride ourselves on being contactable. Okay, Bal and I, you get our direct mobile phone numbers and email address and all that sort of stuff, and you can contact us. Why do we do that? Why is that such a big deal? It's because in our market research leading up to this, the lack of contact was one of the main criticisms of other property courses. So the top guys would pretend, yeah, you can phone me anytime you want, mate, here's my mobile phone number. But then trying to get through to those people is nigh on impossible. Okay, so even if we're busy, Bal and I will always try and get back to you within a couple of hours, or certainly 24 hours max, and which is important. Otherwise, deals could fall out of bed, you know. We need to be contactable so you can get hold of us. Here's today's free gift, okay? Whoop, whoop. That is an American whoop, whoop moment. We've created a report on creating houses in gardens, okay? So that's what I call excess garden land, usually excess side garden land. We've done loads of these. I think it's something like over 25 completely different cases. So we thought, I said to my staff a few months ago, hey, we've done so many of these, let's create a brochure, let's create a report about them where we say what it is, where it is, how big it is, loads of photos of the drawings and the actual photographs of the built building when it's been created and in progress or completed already. So that's what we've done. So we do have that document, and I'm happy to share that all with you, like I say, for free. Okay, Bal and I also know that this land profit method program we put together represents incredible value. So how do we know this? Is it true? How do we know this? Because we both have a background in a number of these other property education programs. And I can promise you, they do not provide anything like the content or assistance that's provided at Land Profit Method. You could pay some of those other guys the same money for a weekend or a long weekend as our course, which lasts 12 months. Okay, so yeah, that's a bit of a wow moment. So just think what you get for our mentees. And these guys, people like Azad and all the other mentees who have finished in the second round course, you get a 12-month in total program. You get 10 modules of education covering all this stuff. You get a further 2 bonus modules of this special stuff like tax, trusts, and funding, etc. You also get the live update and Q&A sessions alternating with the modules. You get also direct access for private one-to-one sessions. They're all included. You don't have to pay extra for that or anything. They're all included. And you also, of course, get the ability to just contact us as well. If you need to run something past us quickly, you can do. And the ability to use us to actually help take projects forward. Okay, and here's the rub. What I say is we hold your hand as much or as little as you wish. So we actually take stuff to pre-app. We're doing this already, people like Azad, to pre-app, to planning, and onwards, even to technical packages, working drawings, spec, that kind of thing, as well as access to our little black book of quality trusted funders and builders and all the other people. There's about 26 things at least that you can need to take a project forward. So I'm talking about things like highways engineers, tree assessments, I say decontamination, daylight and sunlight assessments, ecology, wildlife habitat, the actual landscape scheme itself. There's so many things that you can be asked to do. And what you want is a team in place. So what we say, I could assemble a team in pretty much anything that might be required, probably within about 48 hours. And these are people that I've worked with in the past, and we work month in, month out. What I also like to do, wherever possible, is get some comparable tenders for you, and get a few people to quote for our mentees and our other clients. So everything you could possibly need, almost like a one-stop shop, we can provide that for you. We can create the team that you might need. Okay, that guy's worth a few bob, I understand. It's certainly worth more than purple bricks, which you probably know was sold this morning for £1. So yes, I was reading their shares have plummeted from something like £3.45 each down to 6p each. They then went even lower. So the whole of purple bricks was sold this morning for £1. Crazy. Anyway, this guy's worth a lot more than £1. And this is one of his famous sayings. Somebody asked him what is the most important investment could be. And he said, the most important investment you will ever make is in yourself.